Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the Foreign Correspondents Club. My name is James Sims. I'm a contributor to Forbes and a member of PAC. Today, we actually have an additional guest today. She is the chairman of the House of Councillors Foreign Affairs and Defense Committee. You probably know her, Ms. Satsuki Katayama. As is our main guest today is Mr. Yoshiaki Harada. He's from the House of Representatives of the LDP, and he is a member, a DG of the Budget Committee, and he's going to speak to us today about recently found map showing that the Senkakus, that the Chinese have recognized the Senkakus, at least in 1969, I believe, as being part of Japan. But this territorial issue has been going back and forth, especially over the last decade and a half or so. And Japan not only has the Senkaku issue, but also has other territorial disputes, unlike most of the industrial countries in the West, including the US and Europe. And so today, Mr. Harada will give a brief presentation on that new map, as well as a discussion on some of the other, on this and other territorial issues. And then after that, Ms. Katayama will also give a very brief presentation on a new, I guess, briefing book, I think, that was put together by the Foreign Ministry regarding the Senkaku Islands. Anyway, without any further ado, I would like to welcome our guest speaker, Mr. Harada.
Thank you. じゃあ地図をちゃんとここに持ってきてからこっちに置いてて。
じゃあ私が下げて後ろで持ってます。
そうでもいいし。ずっとだからしやります。Thank you very much, Mr. Sims. I'm so happy to be welcomed to this wonderful place and give me such a wonderful opportunity to make ourselves understood about the real story of the Senkaku Island. Okay, thank you very much. And my English is not so well that I will speak at first the first statement in English, and then after all my statement, for making this more precise and accurate, I would ask the help of the interpreter. Thank you very much. And also, I'm accompanied with the real or genuine evidence of the map, which I should say I found from the history itself, the real one. But this is the copy of it. I used it for at the budget committee the other day, and I showed it to even to Prime Minister Abe and Foreign Minister Kishida, and they are so stunned that of this event. Okay, and well, I will explain later on. This is the real text of the Mao Zedong's words. So later on, I will explain. First of all, I'm very happy to make this statement. The Senkaku Islands are territory inherently part of Japan. Chairman Mao Zedong had authorized these historical facts. Since July of 2012, official vessels from China have consistently encroached upon Japanese zones bordering the Senkaku Islands, while intruding even into the territorial waters. At times, these intrusions into contiguous zones have occurred on 20 separate days in a single month, and 2 to 3 days monthly in territorial waters. Such actions are nothing but gross insult and humiliation to the Japanese nation and are grave violations to its sovereignty. Japan cannot bear this situation and has naturally shown persistent protests against these violations. There is a pressing necessity to assert the legitimacy and status quo of Japanese vested interests. Historically, in January 1895, the Japanese government officially rendered a cabinet decision to incorporate the Senkaku Islands into its national territory. This move came after an extensive survey conducted over some 10 years and was implemented pursuant to the procedures of prior occupation under international law. Over the following 75 years, no nation voiced any objections with regard to the valid control exercised by Japan. Numerous records also testify to the fact that over 200 Japanese lived and worked on these islands during that time. It was not until December 1971 that China began to claim of the sovereignty over the area. Up to then, China itself had recognized the islands as being Japanese territory. All available materials attest to this fact and are also unified in that use of the name Senkaku Islands to refer to these lands. In 1953, for example, such materials were carried in the People's Daily News, the national official organ of the Chinese Communist Party. Materials from 1960, meanwhile, contain mention of the same assessment in the context of an official map of China in an atlas as well as in school textbooks and other formats. On this occasion now, disclosure is being made of a new map. These materials were produced in 1969 and published by the National Administration Surveying, Mapping and Geoinformation of the People's Republic of China. References made to the name Senkaku Islands, while the quotations from Chairman Mao Zedong are attached as the introductory text. Within these quotations, the following statement is considered to be relevant to this area. Listen. There are many rivers, lakes, and marshes that have granted us the blessings of water transport and irrigations, while we likewise benefit from a long coastline that has provided great conveniences of transportation with various overseas peoples. From times of old, the ancestors of we Chinese people worked, lived, and increased the descendants within these vast lands. In this connection, the state guest house, from 1971, China halted use of the term Senkaku Islands in favor of the name Diaoyu Islands. In this connection, the state guest house in Beijing was also accorded the official name of the Diaoyu guest house. Now, we Japanese strongly urge the Chinese government to stop such unlawful intrusions instantly. Japan's position is entirely based upon the rule of law and justice, and the common notion of the modern world is the objective evidence. Above all, real evidence is the only testimony to solve any legal issues. And estoppel is another decisive principle of the international law of today. Man must not say opposite today to the words which he himself said yesterday. This is nothing but a simple common sense. Anybody is accustomed in today's daily life. I would still refer to a Priya Vihia case between Thailand and Cambodia. This was done by the International Court of Justice 2013. And that's all I wanted to say first. And then as soon as I disclosed this news, the Chinese people, including the Chinese government, announced some information, such as one is this resource is faked by the Japanese people, or probably Japanese Harada. And also then the Chinese government spokesman the other day said that this is only if he believes this is the truth, but the only one or two evidence is not enough because the Chinese have 100 or even 1,000 evidences with them. So I urge them to come here and show it. I don't want 1,000 or 100, but at least one or two of the evidence. That's all I wanted to say. Yeah. Well, that's all now. Okay, Ms.
Okay, Ms. Katayama.
May I? May I?
Go
Okay.
ahead.
Thank you very much for inviting us today. The distinguished journalist of Foreign Press Club. Thank you very much for giving us such a chance. And today my role is as acting chairman of Mr. Harada's committee. This is the very first time that with the Japanese government or LDP present to the public that this book. So I already presented to Mr. Simmons this book. And this book history is when we returned to the power in 2012, we started to formulate 2013's budget, and we insist to include publicity budget over territorial issues, including Senkaku. Actually, Senkaku is not a territorial issue, but we have to say that we have to show that it's Japanese territory, historically and logically. And even Ministry of Finance didn't know that such a precious photograph and maps has been carefully preserved by Okinawa people, ex-Ryukyu government officials, and University of Ryukyu's professors and researchers. They have been continuously landing upon Uotsuri or Kitajima to examine rare species such as Senkaku mogura, assorted moa, or some plants which only exist in these islands. And which is more clear that probably you know that it was 1972 that Okinawa was reverted to Japan. In May 1972, Okinawa was reverted to Japan. And beforeward, it was United States Civil Administration of Ryukyu Island, USCAR, which was controlling Okinawa, including Senkaku Islands. This is a proof that upon this island, there is a statute that shows that Senkaku Islands foreign fishery cannot enter into its territorial sea. So it's illegal to fish within Senkaku Islands territory. It's written in English, and this statute is established by USCAR, and it's still standing. And then there are a series of photos that, under the control of USCAR, Ryukyu Immigration Administration Office has been actively controlling and catching violation of the territorial waters and illegal fishing. There are a series of photos. So, honorably, I present to you Foreign Press Club. Thank you very much.
Okay. Thank you. We'd like to go to questions from the working press first. If you could please raise your hand, state your affiliation, and I guess keep it to one question. If we have more time, we can go for a second round of questions. Greg?
My name is Gregory Clark, freelance. I come from Australia. In the Australian archives, there's a map showing that the Etorofu and Kunashiri belonged to Russia or the Soviet Union. After the war, after defeating the war, various maps are produced. After China's defeat in the war with Japan, the Nishin Senso, again, there were a lot of territorial disputes. But I won't talk about maps. I'll just refer to what happened in 1971. The evidence is that China was not very interested in the oil. Zhou Enlai actually said that to Tanaka. He says, look, that's a Taiwan problem. Let them argue about the oil. In 1971 was the reversion, or the talks for the reversion of the Nansei Shoto, right, including Ryukyu, to Japan. And as you know, America returned the administrative right, negotiated with Taiwan, which Tokyo recognized as the government of China, and America recognized as the government of China. They negotiated with China, and at the insistence of Taiwan, the government of China then, America refused to return the sovereignty of the Senkakus to Japan. It returned the administrative control, but refused, under the request of Taiwan, it refused to return the sovereignty. So the sovereignty is still undecided, surely. Incidentally, Senkaku is an English word. It comes from the Pinnacle Islands. It was discovered by the British, and in Japanese it's Senkaku. I think the Taiwanese name for it has always been Diaoyutai.
オーストラリアのフリーランスのグレゴリー・クラークと申します。オーストラリアの公文書館には、地図がありまして、でそこには、エトロフ島と国後島がロシアあるいはその当時のソ連領であるということが記されております。で、戦争の後というのは地図がいろいろ作られるものでして、日清戦争で、中国が負けた後、さまざまな領土紛争が発生しました。1971年までは、中国はですね、この石油問題には関心がなかった。それは田中首相に対しても、それは台湾のことであるというふうに述べていましたが、しかし1971年にその方針を転換しました。で、南西諸島、これは琉球も含みますけれども、これが日本に復帰することになりました。で、アメリカはその当時、琉球の沖縄の施政権をこの日本に返還したというふうに述べていました。で、当時アメリカはこの中国とは国交がなく、そして台湾を認めておりましたので、台湾の依頼に応じて尖閣諸島の主権を日本に返還することは拒否いたしました。施政権は日本に返還するけれども、主権はその返還することを拒否いたしました。で、台湾はずっと以前からリアユータウというその尖閣諸島を意味する言葉をずっと維持しております。
いいですか。それでは今日清戦争の話が出ましたけれども、日清戦争の下関条約、日清戦争の終わった条約、下関条約はですね、1895年の4月にですね、結べられたところであります。もうすでにその時にはですね、1895年の1月には日本はこの尖閣諸島をですね、組み入れておりました。で、この日清戦争の条約の時にはですね、一切中国側からですね、この尖閣の議論は出てきておりませんでね、もともと中国側もこの尖閣が日本のものであるということを認めておった何よりの証だと私どもは考えております。さらにアメリカの政権につきましてはですね、これは当時のですね、この地図、はいはい、そこについては私どもはですね、今一切関中してないところでありまして、もともと中国がですね、 日本の領土として約80年間もう明示的に認めておる。さらには毛沢東主席もですね、日本の領有をですねしっかりと認めておるということでございますから、日中間の問題についてはしっかりですね、中国の側に理解していただきたいなとこう思っております。
Since you referred to the Sino-Japanese War, when the Shimonoseki Treaty, which is a peace treaty after the Sino-Japanese War, was concluded in April 1895, already 3 months before that, in January 1895, Japan had incorporated Senkaku Islands into Japanese territory. And at the time of concluding the treaty, China did not refer to Senkaku Islands at all. So this fact attests to the fact that China recognized that the Senkaku Islands belong to Japan. As for the other issue that you raised, as for the return of the administrative power from U.S. to Japan, I'm not in a position to say anything on that. So for as long as 80 years, China expressly recognized that the Senkaku Islands belonged to Japan, and even the Chairman Mao had recognized that these were Japanese territories. So I would really urge the Chinese government to understand these historical facts between Japan and China.
それからもう一つ、アメリカとの関係でですね、1971年6月に署名された米国との沖縄返還協定ではですね、今の施政権の問題、主権の問題、はっきりとそれは日本に移すということが書いておるということをリファーしたいと思います。
Also, may I add that with regard to the U.S. position, when the Okinawa reversion agreement was signed in June 1971, this agreement expressly stated that the sovereignty as well as the administration will be reverted to Japan.
すいません。ちょっと待って。ちょっと待って。
Which part? His.
じゃあもう一回申し上げますと、
主権とはおっしゃいません。主権と施政権と。
施政権、はい、施政権。
Administrative.
それで申し上げますが、クラークさんがおっしゃったのは、その施政権は返したけれども、主権は返していないということのどういう証拠でどういうふうにおっしゃっているのかを文章を出していただきたいと思います。私が今申し上げたこの本では、そのアメリカ合衆国のその管理として、その領海に侵入して魚を取っている、これは 99% 当時の台湾の台湾ニーズフィッシャリーズがインベージョンしてくることについて、これはイリーガルでその 領域法違反であるというふうに言っていますので、アメリカの認識として台湾は完全に尖閣諸島の領域から見て外人、フォーリンということをはっきり言っております。我々はそういう証拠を持っておりますが、主権がどこにあるかについて明確したものがあるのならばお出しいただきたいと思います。
Since Mr. Clark said that although U.S. returned the administrative right to Japan, but they refused to return sovereignty to Japan. But I would like him to show the evidence by some documents, because this book I have clearly states that under the U.S. administration, the Taiwanese fishermen who were intruding into the territorial waters to do fishing were referred to as the invasion and illegal of foreign fishermen's invasion into the territorial waters, and that it was illegal. So clearly, the United States recognized that Taiwanese were foreigners from the perspectives of these Senkaku Islands. So I would like him to show, if he has some evidence, to show that the sovereignty has not been returned to Japan.
Okay, I forgot to introduce our interpreter for today. It's Ms. Miyako Fujioka. Sorry about that. So I guess going back to this question of sovereignty versus administrative control, so are there documents showing that the U.S. transferred both to Japan, or is that just sort of de facto because the U.S. pushed out the Taiwanese fishermen as foreigners?
今、その主権、そして施政権のことがその問題となっているわけですけれども、それではアメリカが主権と施政権を両方その日本側に返還したという、そういうその証拠というのはあるんでしょうか。それとも事実上の問題としてその台湾のその漁民などは、この違法だと、領海法違反だということで排除していたからだということなんでしょうか。
So I don't know, Mr. Harada or Ms. Okay.
つまり沖縄についてでは主権をそもそも沖縄本島について返還したのかというと、この時返還したのは施政権だけでございまして、日本は国家主権をもうその前の国家主権回復の日を去年やりましたが、その時に回復しておりますので、施政権を返すということだったんで、そこでそもそも主権の問題が触れられていたとすれば、それは非常に驚きであって、それがあるなら出してくださいと私は申し上げたんです。
That applies to the Senkakus as well.
When the Okinawa was returned to Japan, the administrative control was returned to Japan. However, even before that, Japan had already recovered its sovereignty. So when Okinawa was returned to Japan, it was only the question of administrative rule. And if there was any reference at that time to sovereignty over the area, then that must be quite a surprise, and that would have stunned the Japanese people. So that's why we are saying that if you have evidence, please show us.
Okay.
Isabel Reynolds from Bloomberg News. You provided an interesting chart of the number of Chinese entries into Japanese-controlled waters, and I noticed that they're going down considerably over the past year or so. Given that both sides have such entrenched opinions about who has sovereignty here, isn't this the best you can hope for, to keep quiet and try to get back to the kind of peaceful situation you had before 2012?
中国人のその領海への侵入ということに関しまして数を見ますと、この1年ほどは大きく減ってきております。で、日中両国のこの尖閣問題に関する立場というのがどちらもこの譲るつもりはないということなのであれば、この問題については静観していた方がその良いのではないかというふうに思われますが、いかがでしょうか。
私から答えますとね、今お手元にグラフ、この赤いグラフをお配りをしておりますけどね、今のお話ですと数が減ってきてるからですね、平安が取り戻されているということのようですけど、これは断固としてそうじゃありません。むしろ日本の側からすればですね、その意図的に計画的にこの2年半の間ですね、まずは領海に、またもっと多く接続水域にですね、これだけ意図的に入ってきているということは、これは断固として私ども国の独立とまた国の主権、これ侵されているものとこう考えます。今お話になったようにですね、ずっと減ってきてるからもう いいのではないかという意見は私どもは取り得ないところでありましてね、もし議論があるならそういう物理的な脅威脅迫をですねやめて、しっかり議論それは来るのは構いませんけどね、とにかくこういうスレッドこれをですねするのは直ちにやめるべきだとこう考えております。
Now we are distributing this red graphs at your hand, which shows these statistics. You say that because the number of intruders is decreasing, then that's why we have been able to recover this state of peace. However, from the Japanese perspective, for the last 2.5 years, there is an intentional and well-planned intrusion into the territorial waters first, and also to the contiguous zones. And there are many cases of intrusions into these territorial waters. And we cannot tolerate such intrusion and the violation of Japanese independence and sovereignty. So although you may say that since the number of intruders is decreasing, then that's the best way to do it, then we cannot support such a view. If we are to have any discussions on this issue, then first of all, China should stop immediately these physical threats over these territories.
もう一つ私はですね、じゃあ例えば日本のオフィシャルベッソルがね、中国の領海にですね、これだけ意図的に計画的に入っていたときに中国がどうするかということが一つと、それからもう一つは昨年から今年にかけてですね、日本のサンゴ礁に向けてですね、小笠原諸島で300隻から以上の漁船と称する船がですね、日本の小笠原諸島にですね押しかけてきまして、今はだいぶなくなりましたよ。これはね、なぜなくなったかというと、これは皆さん驚くけどね、彼らが平和的になったんじゃないんです。もうこれ大事なですね、サンゴ、黄金サンゴがですねなくなっちゃったんですよ。そういうことを踏まえるとね、率直言ってね、皆さん方に私は申し上げるんだけどね、中国の人々にね、そういう法律、ジャスティス、ロー&ジャスティス、さらには法治国家としての良識、常識、これがあるのかということをあえて問いたいと思います。ぜひそういうこともね、問いただしていただきたいなと思っています。
If I may. For example, I think, if Japanese official vessels intentionally and in a well-planned way intruded into the Chinese territorial waters, then what will happen? Also, from last year to this year, there were over 300 so-called fishing vessels operating in the waters near the Ogasawara Islands to catch some corals. Now the number of those vessels operating in those waters have significantly reduced. And why do you think it is? It's not because they have suddenly become peaceful, but because they have already taken very precious corals from those areas, and there are no more such precious corals in those areas. So honestly speaking, I do think that we have to question whether the Chinese people have really have the intention to secure the law and justice, and whether they have the conscience as the country ruled by law.
So I guess Katayama-san had something to add.
はい。日本はやはり国境が全部海ですから、 そこの防御が非常に重要であるということは前から言われてたんですが、最近になって、特に中国からの、その侵入が多くなり、我々が政権に戻って初めにやったアクションは海上保安庁の体制の倍増で、常に常時24時間尖閣の周辺を見られるような、その船体を組むことを明確に予算で増やしてやったんですが、今度は小笠原の方にも来てしまったので、さらにそれを強化しなければならない状態になり、我々はどちらかというと攻撃しているのではなくて守っているんですよ、ずっと。でさらにここは言論の場だから申し上げに来たんですが、中国の副報道官は定期的に会見をしておりますし、中国の世界中に散っている大使たちも、私が知っている限りで数件、その尖閣諸島に対する中国の領有権を明確に主張するその意見広告を、これはフランスだったらフランスの一流の新聞ペーパー、ル・モンドだったかエコーだったか忘れましたが、その大使として出してますよ。つまり言論の場においても彼らの方が非常にアグレッシブであって、我々の方がホームページに外務省が載せているぐらいでおとなしいので、おそらく記者の方もあまりこういうことをお聞きになってなかったと思います。だから我々はそれをむしろイーブンにする上でこういうことをやっと始めて、こういうことを在京の大使館に今日から外務省が全部届け始めるというのもその一環だし、ジャパンハウスを作って広報するというのも一環だし、今まであまりにも広報がパブリシティが中国側が100だったら日本が7か8だったものを少し均衡させるように持っていくことで世論形成を図りたいというのは、私は実にノーマルな考えだと思います。
Since Japanese national borders are all on the waters, so the defending those territorial waters and national borders on the seas is very important, and especially since the increasing intrusion by China into the territorial waters, it has become even more important. And that is why, since LDP returned to power, what we did first is increase the capacity of the Coast Guard to patrol the areas 24 hours a day. And that is why we increased the budget for that. But we now have this new problem surrounding the Ogasawara Islands, and we have to tackle that too. So far, Japanese response has been defensive rather than offensive on this question. On the other hand, Chinese spokesperson hold regular press meetings, and also the Chinese ambassadors around the world have been frequently referring to the claim over the Senkaku Islands on many different occasions. For example, in the Le Monde or other major newspapers in France and other countries, they have put up the advertisement sponsored by the ambassador himself or herself. So the Chinese has been quite aggressive in these efforts to claim the territorial sovereignty over the Senkaku Islands, whereas on the Japanese side, it has been rather very mute, maybe only the publicity on the homepage of the foreign ministries. So that's why the press people may not be familiar with the facts and the arguments on Japanese side. So what we are trying to do is to make it a little bit even in terms of the publicity. And that's why this book that I have just described will be distributed to the embassies in Tokyo starting today. And that is why we built the Japan House in order to use it for publicity purposes. So far, the publicity efforts from the Chinese side, if that was 100, then our efforts were probably around 70, 80. 7 or 8. So that what we are trying to do is to strike a balance between these two, and I think that is a quite normal thing to do.
Okay. Any other questions? I guess in the back here.
Süddeutsche Zeitung Germany, Neidhardt. Since you stress the rule of law, the only or the one court decision I know of was made in 1944 by the Tokyo District Court saying in a lawsuit between fisher cooperatives of Taiwan and fishing cooperatives of Okinawa about the possession of the Senkaku Island. And Tokyo District Court said they belong to Taiwan. Now, this decision has never been overturned. Doesn't that mean that after the return of Taiwan, the sovereignty to Taiwan, actually those islands do belong not to China, not to Tokyo, but to Taiwan?
日本は法治国家であるというふうに強調されておりましたけれども、この問題をめぐって1944年に東京地裁が台湾の漁業組合と沖縄の漁業組合との間の紛争につきまして判断を下しています。尖閣の領有をめぐってです。で、その時に東京地裁の判決は、これは台湾に属するという判断をしておりまして、それ以降この判断というものは覆されておりません。そういうことを鑑みますと、この尖閣諸島の領有権というのは中国ではなく日本ではなく台湾にあると考えるべきではないでしょうか。
初めて、そのことは聞きましたけどもね、私は今のね裁判というのは一切つまびらかじゃありませんけれども、その主文でどう書いてるか裁判判決っていうのはね、そしてまたその説明の中にですね、どういうような説明が行われているか、そこはあるとしても何か混乱しておられるような気がいたします。いずれにいたしましても、裁判所が国内の地方裁判所が決めるわけではありませんね。これは国家と国家の問題でありますので、その辺はぜひお分かりいただきたいと思います。
Well, this was my first time to hear about this Tokyo District Court's decision, and of course, you have to see the details of what the major sentencing part says and what the explanation of the sentence says. Even if there is such a reference, probably there was some confusion in it. But at any case, it's not the task of regional court to decide about the territorial dispute. It's a question between states, and I would like you to understand this part.
Joel? Go ahead, Joel.
Joël Lejean from French TV and radio, DFM TV and RTL. Sorry, I hope I don't disturb you. Sorry for this intrusion about the coral issue, which I think is very interesting indeed, as you mentioned in the Senkaku issue. There is another problem about corals in Okinawa, and I'd like to ask you your opinion, you too. What do you think exactly of what is going on regarding the governor orders to halt the work related to the US space relocation? Is it something we should consider as political or rather ecological?
Critical, you said. Did you say critical?
Political.
Political use. Or ecological.
Well, I guess Katayama-san is the chair of the Defense Committee, so that might be appropriate for her.
この違法操業問題については私の委員会ではなくてその農林水産業の漁業の方で法律を厳しくしまして、その違法にそのサンゴと違法に密漁した場合の罰金を10倍から30倍というすごい高いところに上げたんですよ。それは去年の秋の臨時国会でやりました。ちょうどその頃からその若干入ってくる船は減ったんですが、その時に日本政府としても何回もその中国側にですね、こういった違法漁業をしないでほしいということを申し入れ、中国側は違法漁業を やれということは言わず、一応言ってみるというようなことは言っていたので、そこはだから政治的な問題というよりは、やはり経済的な、ある種の窃盗のような話だったのではないかなというふうには考えております。ただいずれにしても領海を越えて窃盗が行われるようなことがあったら、日本国政府としては国民の命や財産を守りきれてないということになるので、そこは我々は非常に深刻に考えて、違法に入ってくるものを実力でストップできるような体制を組まなければいけないということで、今までは臨検することがなかったんですが、その船をちゃんと審判できる司法当局があるところまで曳航してきて、違法だよと言わせると、で罰金の支払いを命令するということをやるところまでは一歩踏み込みました。見ている限りでは経済的な事情が大きいとは思いますが、それだけでこれだけオイルが高い中でですね、あそこまでたくさんの船が来れるのかどうかについては疑問はなしとしません。ただ投機によって異常な値段がそのサンゴについているのは事実で、そのためにたとえ捕まってもいいから密漁する人がいるのも事実です。はい。
はい。Well, this question of illegal fishing of corals, it's under the responsibility of not my committee, but the Agricultural and Fishery and Forestry Committee. But after this increasing vessels operating in the Ogasawara Islands, the government has increased the fines by 10 times to 30 times. And that was done in fall last year in the extraordinary diet sessions. And since around that time, the number of vessels operating in the Ogasawara Islands has been decreasing. And we, of course, have protested against the Chinese government a number of times, asking them to stop those illegal fishing. And the Chinese government has replied that we will tell that to those fisher people. And it seems that there is more. Excuse me. So it is not really a political question, but rather an economic question. It's a question of theft. But in any case, if foreign vessels operate illegally in Japanese waters, then that is a question of Japan being unable to protect the Japanese people's lives and the assets. Therefore, we take it very seriously. And that's why we think that we need a system under which we can stop those illegal vessels coming into the waters. So that's why we have been stepping up our efforts to find those illegal vessels. We first escort those illegal vessels to the area where we can claim under the international law that we can claim that they are illegally operating in those areas, and we will impose the fines on them. So it is rather an economic questions, and the economic motivation seems to be larger than the political. However, if you consider that in this kind of environment where the fuel prices is very high for vessels, so I wonder why so many vessels can come to Japanese territorial waters. So there is some room for suspicion. And that is why we have been stepping up our efforts in order to stop the illegal coral fishing.
Joe, you had a second part of the question, right? Yeah, Okinawa. There was a second part to the question regarding Okinawa.
沖縄に関してはその知事のですよね。はい、現在その辺野古の。
Do you want to restate the question just to? Yeah.
And to make it simply, how do you view the situation with Okinawa, where there is indeed also an economical aspect with the coral fishing that some people in Okinawa complained about? But I'm referring especially to the governor battle with the current administration. I mean, what do you think about this very hot issue right now?
この問題につきましてはですね、私ども日本政府、 さらには与党としてはですね、何としても沖縄のまた国の安全保障の観点からですね、辺野古への移転というのはどうしても必要なものだと、政治的には確かに、もう少し説得する必要がございますけれども、ぜひ沖縄の人々には本当に国の安全保障、さらにはですね、国民の願いも踏まえて、ぜひまたご理解いただきたいなと、知事にもそう期待をしたいと思っています。
The Japanese government and the ruling party think that the transfer of the base to Henoko is indispensable. Of course, politically speaking, we need to make further efforts to convince the Okinawa people. However, from the viewpoint of the Japan's security, and also based on the wishes of the Japanese people, I do want the Okinawan people and the governor to understand the necessity of the transfer of the base.
Ms. Katayama, did you want to add anything to that? Okay. So I guess the lady over here, are you working press? Okay, sure.
中国新華社通信の劉書類と申しますが、一つ、お伺いします。ですね、この尖閣諸島の名前についてなんですけれど、これは皆さんもご存知のように、1900年、黒沢という方が、イギリス海軍の地図から訳されたものでありまして、それでもし仮にはですね、イギリスが、今日本政府が中国の地図を持っていて、その尖閣諸島の名前が書いているから、それこそ日本のものだと証明されていると言っているんですけれど、もしイギリスが日本の地図を持って、尖閣諸島は我々がつけた名前で書いて、その和訳を使っているんじゃないかと領有権を主張してきたらどうなるでしょうか。実際はですね、そのイギリスはそう要求してきていません。なぜならその領有権を判断するときにはですね、たった1枚の地図で決定的な証拠にならないとは思いますけれどね、その島に関する、歴史的経緯、つまり尖閣諸島の場合にでいうと1895年の閣議決定、その閣議決定に至るまでの歴史経緯が重要な参考になると思いますが、そこでお聞きしたいんですけれど、その1895年の閣議決定のよって編入された後は、この編入されたことについて新聞記事など官報にも一切公表していません。つまり対外にも国内に対しても国際に対しても公表していません。それはなぜでしょうか。もし。
Okay, Mr. Harada.
はい。
いや、私どもは今お話だと1895年の閣議決定、しかも日本が宣戦という国際的なルールに基づいてこの国を正式に編入したということ、そのことが国際的に広報されてないということでしょうか。もしそういうことであれば当然これは国際法に基づいてやっておりますのでですね、と思っておりますけれども。
So you said that after the cabinet decision in 1895, the question was that after the decision of the cabinet minister of 1895 to incorporate the Senkaku Islands into Japan, there was no publicity made, for instance, in the newspapers or the official gazettes. There was no publicity about it inside and outside of Japan. So that was the question, and the answer was that at the time of the cabinet decision in 1895, the Japan followed the international law of the notion of the prior occupation, and based on that notion, Japan officially incorporated Senkaku Islands into Japan. And you say that there was no publicity internationally about this fact, and if so, please understand that we incorporated the islands according to the international law.
Okay. Any other questions from the working press? Are you working press? Okay. Wait a minute. The same organization or? Oh. Okay. Well, we usually try to get different organizations first. So, and then if we have time, we can go back. Any other questions from the working press? Okay. I mean, is it something you can do quickly or? Okay.
I was asked to give the evidence about America's refusal to transfer sovereignty of the Senkakus to Japan in 1971. There have been numerous articles. Recently, a book has come out by Mr. Eldridge, who belongs to the Marine Corps in Okinawa, going into the detail. It's a very interesting question, why America refused. And one theory is that the Taiwan lobby in Washington at the time was very strong, and Taiwan offered to make concessions on textile exports to America. The other theory says that Mr. Kissinger intervened, and Kissinger at the time was very keen to have good relations with China. But the evidence is certainly there.
はい、先ほど私に対してですね、アメリカが、主権を日本に返すことは拒否したといったことについて証拠はあるのかと問われたわけなんですけれども、数々のその記事が書かれておりますし、最近は元、沖縄に駐留していた海兵隊員だったエルドリッチさんという方がこれに関する本も出されております。で、アメリカがなぜその主権の返還を拒んだのかということは大変興味深い問題です。で、当時ワシントンでは台湾ロビーが非常に強力であった時でした。で、その一説によりますと、繊維製品の輸出問題と引き換えだったのではないかという話もありますし、またキッシンジャー氏がこの問題に介入したというふうにも言われております。当時キッシンジャー氏は中国と大変親しい関係にありました。
Okay. Did you want to follow up?
No. そういった本や経緯について当時アメリカが交渉上中国側に気兼ねとかいろいろな配慮されていたかどうかは、そういったことがあろうとなかろうとクリアであるのはそのサンフランシスコ平和条約において、尖閣諸島っていうのはこの条約の2条に基づいて我が国が放棄した領土のうちには含まれてなくて、3条に基づいて南西諸島の一部としてアメリカ合衆国の施政権下に置かれ、沖縄返還協定においても我が国に施政権が返還されたということは、クリアでございますし、この本に皆様に差し上げたこの本にあるようにアメリカのその US ガバメントが台湾から来る船を外国の船として乗けていたのは事実です。つまりワシントンでのロビーがどうであろうが実際現場においてアメリカは台湾の漁船を外国のものとして乗けていました。どうぞ。
There may be such a book written, and there may be some historical facts regarding the negotiations between U.S. and China at that time. Maybe there were some considerations to the Chinese positions from the U.S. government. I don't know, but at any rate, it is true that the Senkaku Islands were not included in the territories that Japan renounced under Article 2 of the San Francisco Peace Treaty. And under the Article 3, which referred to the Nansei Shoto or Southwest Islands, the Senkaku Islands are part of the Nansei Shoto, which were rendered under the U.S. administrations under this treaty. And with the conclusion of the Okinawa Reversion Agreement, those territories were reverted to Japan. So it is very clear that the Senkaku Islands belong to Japan. And this book clearly states that under the U.S. administration, the Taiwanese vessels were regarded as foreign vessels, and they were expelled from these waters. So, however strong the Taiwan lobby might have been at the time in Washington, on the ground in the area, the Taiwanese vessels were regarded as foreign vessels and were expelled by the U.S. And we have numerous photos in this book displaying such acts.
もう一つ私からいいですか、付け加えしていただきたいのはこの私のペーパーのです一番最後にですね、レファレンスとしてプレア・ビヘアケースというのをちょっと参考まで挙げています。これは皆さんもご存知と思いますけども、最終的には2013年に最終的決着しましたが、タイとカンボジアの間でですね、カンボジアの領域にあるお寺、このビヘアプレア寺院ですね、これが世界遺産になったもんですから、タイが急にですね主権領有を主張し始めました。それが国際司法裁判所にですね訴えられたわけであります。いろいろ議論はあったんですけど、最終的にはですね、これはタイ自身がこのお寺はカンボジアの領土に入っているということをタイ自身が長い間ですねその自分たち地図にずっと載せておりました。それが最終的な決め手になって現在ではカンボジアの領有であるということが決着したということをこのレファレンスの中書いているところであります。ついででございますけど付け加えています。
Additional comment from me. In my paper, at the last portion of my paper, I made a reference to this case of player behavior case. This was a dispute between Thailand and Cambodia, and it finally settled in 2013. But this case was about the territorial claims by both countries to this player behavior shrine, which was in the Cambodian territories at that time. But since this shrine was designated the World Heritage, then Thailand began asserting that it belonged to the Thai territory, and that's why the case was brought before the ICJ. And finally, the decision was handed down that because Thailand itself had long described this shrine as part of the Cambodian territories in their maps, in the Thai maps. And that was a decisive factor for the ruling that this shrine belonged to the Cambodian territories.
先ほどのドイツの方から先ほどのドイツの方からのクエスチョンで1944年 You mentioned 1944その時代に台湾は日本国の下の台湾県でした。そして台湾の知事は日本の中央西部内務省の官僚でした。なぜかというと私の親族に近い親族に当時の台湾知事がおりますので、その台湾の県と例えば鹿児島なり隣の県との間で何らかの財産上の争いがあったら、それはそういう判決はあったかもしれません。我々も調べてみますが、それは国内の漁協と漁協の争いにしかなってないんです。当時は台湾は日本だったんです。それはクリアですよ。だって知事がいたんですから。ですからどういう判決だかをもう一回見せていただいた上ですが、いずれにしても台湾は当時1944年は台湾県であったのは事実です。
Okay, I
And
think
as to the this question from a German journalist regarding this Tokyo Regional Court's decision in 1944, at that time in 1944, Taiwan was a prefecture of Japan, since Taiwan was part of Japan at that time. So the governor of Taiwan was a bureaucrat belonging to the Ministry of Interior. And I can say this myself because in one of my relatives used to be the Taiwan governor in those days. And therefore, it was there may have been some disputes over assets between Taiwan and the neighboring provinces and prefectures such as Kagoshima Prefecture, but in this case was a dispute between different regional fishing cooperatives in Japan. And at that time, Taiwan was part of Japan. That is clear. So I don't know about this ruling. I have to see the details of the ruling. But it is clear that at that time, Taiwan was a province of Japan.
今いただいた地図ですが、先ほどから原田会長が示されているのは中国の方の北京の方の地図ですが、台湾の1965年の国防研究院の地図におきましても1965年ですがクリアに尖閣諸島は日本側の領域に含まれております。これは1965年の台湾国防研究院の地図でございます。
Mr. Harada was referring to the map by Beijing, but there is another map. This was published in 1965 by Taiwanese Defense Research Institute. And on this map, too, clearly Senkaku Islands are demarcated as part of Japanese territories. It's very clear on this map.
一つだけこの地図でですね、これが1969年中国の中国人民共和国が出した地図です。でここに台湾と沖縄ですね、ここにはっきりと国境線がこう書いてある。これはどこの地図でもね国境を印す時のこれなんです。ですから今台湾と日本という意味ではですね、そこは非常にはっきりしてるんではないかなとこう思います。それから先ほど毛沢東語録の中でロングコーストラインという言葉を僕はあえて言いましたけど、これはね私の理解ではこのことをねロングコストラインで諸外国と親善の交流を長い間続けてきたと、こういうふうに理解しております。
And so this is the map that I was talking about of 1969, published in People's Republic of China. And there is a clear boundaries marked on this map between Taiwan and Okinawa. So the national borders between Taiwan and Okinawa are very clearly shown here on this map. I also referred to the quotes from the Chairman Mao from his Little Red Book, and the long coastline I quoted. But by this long coastline, he referred to the very long coastline of mainland China, through which the China had maintained the friendships and the exchanges with neighboring countries for a long time.
Okay, I think we've run out of time. We're actually run over quite a bit. So I'd like to thank our speakers today, Mr. Harada and also Ms. Katayama. Thank you again. I think that left us a bit more informed. I think some of us might be a bit more confused, but it'll give us, I guess, some more time to actually study the issue. Thank you very much. And as is our usual custom, we would like to give you an honorary membership for a year.